Guys, welcome back to the next episode of the Investor Army Podcast. Today we have a high-level real estate entrepreneur who started his business doing rehabs, wholesaling. He's done mobile homes. He's done lots in this business. He transitioned into doing bigger deals, new development. He's also a product creator. You may have heard of Propelio, which we'll get into here in just a little bit. But let me introduce you to my guest, Daniel Moore.
Hey, Connor, I appreciate you having me on here. Thank you for today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. I'm always grateful to see you. I was just in y'all's studio just a couple of days ago or last week, and what y'all are doing there is pretty impressive. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit because you are going national with Propelio, which I think is important for everybody on here to know about, especially you new wholesalers. It's going to allow you to help run comps for your business. But let's kind of dig into kind of your transition in real estate. I know that you have a kind of a unique background and you scaled quickly. You have a lot of attention going on here in DFW, and you've shifted your mindset to go into bigger deals and bigger projects. And I kind of want to talk about that progression because I think what you've done is kind of a model that a lot of other investors who were in your shoes a few years ago need to follow. So kind of talk about when you started out a little bit, and then we'll move into how you progressed into doing some of these bigger deals and talk about some of those.
I appreciate that, man. So I started in real estate when I was 23. A lot of people probably know by now what a little bit of my background was, but went into full-time investing by the time I was 26 or 27. And as I went into full-time, I kind of struggled getting some traction. But as I gained traction, I really started kind of ramping things up and went through some rich dad education. I was able to achieve the Hall of Fame for 2013 through Robert Kiyosaki's Hall of Fame. But after all that was said and done with, man, the primary reason for getting into this for me and for a lot of people is for the lifestyle, for the benefits of what it is. And it's not necessarily the money. The money is what gives you the lifestyle. But my goal was to be able to relax, to be able to spend time at home, to be able to go out and travel and do those types of things. And in 2015, I did a massive number of properties. But after it was all said and done with, I was still working 80-hour weeks, 100-hour weeks. And that's no lifestyle. That's not a lifestyle. That's crazy. You can't keep those kind of hours up and still live. So rolling through 2015, at the end of 2015, I contracted one of the largest properties I'd ever done before. And you may or may not have heard about it, but I did. It was over there in the University Park area, University Park, Highland Park, Park Cities area. I got a house for $320,000. And dirt over there is worth more than $320,000. And the house I picked up was practically retail ready. I mean, the home as it sat was worth probably about $470,000. I picked it up for $320,000. I could have wholetailed it and made triple net after paying points, holding costs, sales fees. Probably could have pulled about $150,000 in profit off of that deal. But everything around me was telling me that I needed to go bigger or go home. And whenever I really started doing some due diligence on it, that said the highest and best use in that neighborhood was to bulldoze it and go new construction. So all the new construction development on there was going around $1.5 million or so. And original 1940s homes were selling for about $500,000. So I picked it up for $320,000. If I would have put 20 into it, I could have sold it for about $515,000. I ended up foregoing that profit and saying, you know what, I need to put on my working boots and make something happen here. So on December 16th of 2015, which happened to be my birthday, we pulled a bulldozer out to that house and bulldozed $150,000 worth of profit to the ground. So that was one of those am I making the right decision kind of days, where you're literally pulling a tractor up to $150,000 and just bulldozing it. So, that was a stressful day, but that was a shift in me to move on forward and do something different. So we bulldozed it to the ground. We started breaking ground on new construction there in January. We had all the soil tests done, and we started going vertical on it very soon. As the vertical progress went on, it took me about 10 months from breaking ground to finishing it. And when we turned around and sold that one, I mean, we did on that one deal a little over $300,000 in profit. So, I mean, we doubled our profit. It took us 10 months, but what I was able to do is I was able to do essentially one deal that year. I ended up doing a couple dozen properties that year, but a lot of the other ones were just either simple rehabs or wholesales. And that one deal made more than all of my other deals combined. So I did a couple dozen properties that year, but one of them was really the nugget of the deals. So I started really, once again, I've done it in the past, but I started analyzing what I was doing in my business and what was making me the most money. And although wholesales, could be good money, rehabs could be good money, I was still working 100-hour weeks to make $300,000 or $400,000. And it's just like, I know there's better ways to make money out there than doing this. And you hear the Grant Cardones, you hear the 10X rules, you hear all that stuff. And I had some of my personal mentors like Will Crozier, um, and other people that I've worked around in the days. They're like, you need to go bigger. You need to go bigger. You need to go bigger. And honestly, the only reason I never went bigger is I was scared. I was like, where am I going to get this? Where am I going to get that? All the things that I'd preached to other people not to do was faults of my own. I was scared. Now that I've gone bigger, I don't see how I could ever, go back. If I'm analyzing a deal and I'm not making six figures on it real fast and easy, I'm probably not doing it. And people will be like, well, you don't have any houses you're doing right now. I'm like, I don't need to do any houses right now. I'm waiting to find that deal that's got a 7-figure payday on it. Yeah. If anytime I spend looking at a 6-figure payday is just a day that I'm not making a 7-figure payday. So it might be 4 or 5 months before I find another deal, but in those 4 or 5 months, I'm focusing on other things.
Yep.
So when we sold that one, and it was probably 2 or 3 months went by, and I wasn't actively looking for a commercial acquisition, but I was actually at a REIA event, and a guy was walking past that I had known through the industry, and he's like, "Hey man, you looking to pick up a commercial property?" And my universal answer to just about anything like that is, well, it depends.
Yep.
Show me what the numbers look like. And just really quickly, over the course of about 5 minutes, he explained to me what the deal was, what the numbers looked like, and my ears perked up. And within probably 48 hours, I had it under contract. And that would happen to be a 60,000 square foot light industrial warehousing complex out in Weatherford. We picked it up all in with the assignment fee. We had to pay a $300,000 assignment fee for that. Tell me that wasn't a happy day for the wholesaler, man. So yeah, he actually assigned it to me. We didn't double close that. So when we were talking about it, yeah, that's for some of y'all out there that are concerned about, disclosing your assignment fee. I would say on both sides, you need to be concerned, but at the same time, if you're working with the right people, you don't need to be concerned. And, I'm not going to.
Yeah. The seller didn't say anything when it got to the closing table.
No, I mean, the seller knew flat out that we were making a lot of money. I mean, the seller, it's not like the seller was like, oh, I think this is retail. And he's like, I know you're going to make $1 million on this. I know you are. I'm tired of dealing with it. I'm at a point in life where I'm ready to see it gone. And here you go. Wow. Take it. So, he knew everything that was going on. So we were all into it for $1.6 million on the acquisition. And one of the really nice things about that deal was we weren't dealing with really a distressed asset. We were dealing with distress management. So there wasn't massive amounts of deferred maintenance. There wasn't really a whole lot of issues. We're talking about steel construction buildings. There's no sheetrock. There's no tar roofs. It's all metal. So we were really just dealing with deferred management. The rents were severely below market. Rents are at about 20% of what market should have been. So we went in there, and with it being light industrial warehouse, 60,000 square foot, but even with 60,000 square foot, we're only dealing with about 9 tenants. So many of the tenants were behind on payments, and some of them couldn't afford where rents were going to. So we're in the transitioning period right now, and things are looking good. And once that's stabilized, we'll probably be into it after debt service. The negative amortization from the debt service while we're trying to stabilize this property. And actual cleanup costs, we're probably going to be into this thing for about $1.9 million. Retail on it at a 10 cap. And I think we could actually probably pull closer to an 8 or 9 cap out of the Weatherford market whenever this is all said and done with. But even looking at it on a 10 cap, we're looking at about a $3.4 million sales price. So our total cap gain on that one should be about $1.7 million. So probably about, my bad, I said 1.7, probably about $1.4 million. But we're not really looking to sell it. We're actually going to hold that. Even once we've got it stabilized and we're still debt servicing, our net operating income on this deal is going to be about $19,000 a month. So we're going to be $19,000 a month in passive income, have about $1.4 million in equity sitting there that we could borrow against for unrealized capital gains to continue our investing. We could take out some loans against it, some credit lines against it, use those to front fund some of our rehabs or gap fund some rehabs or other projects that we're doing. So it's kind of our own little personal piggy bank. We got like $1 million in credit just sitting there to use. So looking past that, the way we structured the financing, we've got a 5-year note on it. So at the end of 5 years, it's going to be paid off. So in 5 years, our cash flow should jump from about $19,000 to about $30,000. So in 5 years, we're now going to have $30,000 a month in passive income. And, why let that deal go? Weatherford's an up and coming market. They've got a lot of new businesses coming in. They've got a lot of development going in. So I see no reason in letting that asset go.
Yeah. So like most people are just trying to make 10,000 a deal. when they hear $100,000 a deal, people kind of think, is that possible? And he's sitting here talking about making $1 million a deal. And it comes from just, analyzing situations that you normally wouldn't look at because, like you said, of fear. Or what do you think is the main reason people don't, besides fear, transition into the bigger deals? They think they can't find the funding, or they don't know how to analyze a deal like that? Or what do you think is the limitation that stops most investors going up the ladder real quickly like that?
I still believe it is fear, and fear of the unknown. See, there's all kinds of fear there. But all the things that you just mentioned are all unknowns. And people get scared of that because I don't know if I can get the funding. I don't know how to analyze the deal. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. There's just a bunch of I don't knows, which create a wall of fear. And my experience with what I've been doing so far, and please don't let this come across as me being some big time commercial investor. That was my first commercial investment. And, I'm learning as I'm pushing through, but it really just boils down to having a large amount of unknown. But my experience so far has been this is not any more difficult than a decent single family transaction. It's all the same processes and procedures. You're going to have contract negotiations. You're going to have close of escrow. You're going to have your title work. But then once you've done that, so slight differences between commercial law or commercial property tenant landlord issues versus residential. But honestly, they favor the landlord once again on the commercial side, and there's even less to deal with on the commercial side, like notices for people to vacate, terms of occupancy, all of that type of stuff. Much, much, much more lenient when you get into the commercial side of things.
Yep.
When we're talking about business commercial, not really so much multifamily commercial, because multifamily commercial, you're still dealing with residential property.
Now you've kind of been through this already. For an investor that's kind of at a point where they're doing, scaling their business, what is a good level, or what is a good safety net for an individual to kind of step up that aggression level and kind of, take a chance? So do you think that when they've got $100,000 in the bank or $200,000 in the bank, or what kind of, where were you at when you decided, hey, I'm going to take a chance? Because once you have that safety net, it's easier to get more aggressive and take a chance at a big deal. Because if it goes wrong, you're not out of business. So a lot of people are in a situation where they're doing 10, 15, 20 deals a year, but one big deal that goes wrong, the carrying costs are going to eat them up. They're going to either have to get foreclosed on, turn that property over, and it can wipe them out. So where were you at kind of when you started to make that transition in your own business?
I'm not going to say that you need a safety net per se as far as capital of your own. What you need to understand is the value of partnerships. Like that deal that I just took down, I essentially had two other partners in that deal. One of the partners being the seller. So I essentially made the partner my seller in the deal because he became my bank. I got that deal owner financed. So I was able to negotiate some really good terms with them. We've got 6 months of deferred payments up front. So I knew I was going to go through a negative debt service on the front side of this. And I knew that was going to be $10,000 a month in payments I was going to have to make. So I'm looking at $60,000 a month, or $60,000 just up front in negative debt service. How do I overcome that? Well, I talked to one of my partners, which was the seller of this property. This was helped negotiated with the wholesaler. The wholesaler did structure a really nice deal here. But whenever I got on board, we renegotiated some of these terms with the seller. And I was like, hey, we're running negative right out the front. Some of the things that we are going to be doing in addition to purchasing your property is improving it. We're going to replace the garage doors. We're going to take care of some of the other things around here. We're going to paint everything, make it look uniform. All this stuff is going to be money coming out of my pocket, plus paying you your monthly payment, which is really putting me in a bit of a pinch up front. If you want me to close this, let's work together as a team and build a partnership out of this. You give me the first 6 months without me having to pay you.
Yep.
You give me the first 6 months without me having to pay you. That'll give me the opportunity to get this all brought up to a nice uniform standard across the board. And then 6 months from now, I'll start paying you like clockwork.
Yep.
So I was able to handle that up front. Partner number two was one of my money guys. I brought one of my money guys to the table and I was like, hey, this is the deal we have on the table. This is the amount of reserves that we need to make it go on. This is what we need to make it all set up. And when it was all said and done with, I got the deal 100% financed. I've been investing 100% finance now for close to 5 years. Very, very, very few of my deals do I ever put in my own capital into, because in my opinion, you need three things to make a deal work. You need time, you need money, and you need knowledge.
Yep.
And there's two things that I can bring to the table on every deal, and that's time and knowledge. I have plenty of both. Why do I need to invest my capital as well? So what I'll do is I'll approach some of my private money lenders and I'll be like, hey, this is the deal that's on the table. This is what I'm offering. If you're interested in jumping on this deal with me, this is what we'll do for you. So I work with equity partnerships. I work with debt partnerships. But in that particular scenario, I pulled together a 50-50 partnership. So my investor dropped close to. We had to pay 150,000 up front on the assignment. We had to pay another 250,000 down to the seller. That was part of the down payment. So all in all, on the front side, we were into it for about 400 grand in capital dropped straight off the top. But then we have probably another $150,000 in carrying costs and small improvements to the property. So we were really looking at about $600,000 or $700,000 in onto the deal, of which is 100% financed to me, but I still have half the profit.
Yep.
So
he's using utilization of a good partner and creative knowledge, I must say, because most of these deals, as you go higher up, they're more complex. You need to be able to kind of structure them. And I think that's probably where a lot of people also get left behind, is they don't have the knowledge to structure a deal like this, or they don't even think outside the box enough to kind of put it together. Specifically on your first deal, most people would have only been blinded by that big profit on the front end. They wouldn't have thought, hey, what's the best use of this property, right? They weren't going to kind of look into it. But because you had a program that you created, right, Propelio, you were able to dig in to kind of run the comps. And so I think it's important, guys, if you're looking in these older areas and these high price point areas, you need to run the new build comps. So kind of explain to them what Propelio is and what it can, or how it can benefit specifically new wholesalers or individuals who do not have access to the MLS.
So Propelio was born out of a necessity, as any good product should be. And as a Texas investor, we all know Texas being a non-disclosure state, it is extremely difficult to get dependable, accurate access to comps 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in my business, and then through my partnership with Nate Worcester, the co-founder of Propelio, we came up with a solution to that, working with our brokers. Texel Real Estate was a broker that I've worked with for several years, and we all came down to the table and like, how do we solve this problem? And what we have provided is Propelio, and Propelio solves several problems outside of just the comps, and that is true MLS comps 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You go in there, you type in an address, and you immediately get sold, expired, withdrawn, pending, all that information returned to you along with the rental comps. Above and beyond that, it was purpose built for running comps. So a lot of the MLS systems that you use, they're an agent's tool. They're a real estate agent's tool, not necessarily purpose built for running comps. So whenever you get on Propelio versus like the MLS tools, Propelio is very fast. Like if you want to run a comp, 30 to 45 seconds, you've got really all the data you need in front of you to really quickly make some top level decisions. So whenever you're doing a large volume of properties with Propelio, I have people that have access to the MLS that are real estate agents, but still use Propelio for their day-to-day business just because of the speed at which they can analyze the property. Yep. So another issue that many newer investors have is getting access to leads. We do 4 types of lists here in the local DFW market. We're in DFW, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Fort Myers, Florida, Miami, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, St. Louis, Missouri, and we're pending release in Corpus Christi, Waco, Chicago, Illinois, Salt Lake City, Utah. Wow. But we provide lead lists. So notice the defaults. Yep, sorry about that.
No. That's what I was going to ask you. Which leads are you putting out? I know you get specific lists, and I want to kind of talk about a couple of those because I think a lot of people aren't familiar with some of those lists, and they're actually probably producing pretty well from you, or pretty well for investors. And I know a lot of investors are actually, personally that I know, have done some deals and some pretty big deals that they pulled right off your Propelio lists that y'all been putting out. So, yeah.
Well, where the lists were born from was my single family investing business. When I first got involved in single family investing, I started targeting pre-foreclosures. That's kind of the low hanging fruit. Everybody knows about it. It's there. And I started out buying lists from some of the list providers around. But what I was finding out is that some of the list providers around, I was getting old data. I was getting data that was a couple weeks old. And if it was a couple weeks old, then I'm a couple weeks late to the game. And that's not something you want to be whenever you're competing in a competitive industry. So I started bringing all of my list creation in-house. I hired up a team of virtual assistants, trained them on how to build lists. And I started doing all of my own appointments as substitute trustees, which is a little known list in the industry. Not too many people understand what that is. I also started marketing to notice of trustee sales. Notice of trustee sales and appointments to substitute trustees are both kind of in the pre-foreclosure arena, but the appointments is kind of like a pre-foreclosure. You don't necessarily know they're going into foreclosure, but it's a high probability that they are. Actually, that deal that I knocked out that I was telling you I bulldozed to the ground, that one came off of an appointment of substitute trustee. They were behind on payments, but the foreclosure hadn't been filed yet.
So,
Um,
so like on that list, right? So, what's basically happening behind the scenes where the information is being recorded? The trustee is changing, right, or it's about to
yes.
change, and there's a document that's filed down at the county that they can go
So
pull. Yeah,
yeah, for them, I mean that's basically what it is. In Texas, we're a deed of trust state, and there's a trustee noted on the deed of trust that's responsible for enforcing the deed of trust. The deed of trust being the security instrument in the collateral for the property. So the deed of trust says what happens if you stop making payments. Well, what happens is the trustee is supposed to initiate the foreclosure. Well, if you bought your house in 1998 and it's now 2017 and the bank's about to foreclose on you, the probability that the trustee that was on your deed of trust is the same trustee that the bank wants to use is highly unlikely. So what the bank will do is file a piece of paperwork down at the court saying we are appointing a new substitute trustee, which is essentially removing the original trustee off of the deed of trust. You keep using that word trust a lot, so don't let it get confusing, but remove the trustee from the original deed of trust and replace them with a new substitute trustee. That is not a state regulated document. That document can be filed at any time. That document can be filed 3 minutes before property goes to foreclosure. That document can be filed a year before it goes to foreclosure. That document can be filed with no pending foreclosure at all. That document is not regulated, so it is not a guaranteed foreclosure. But my experience says that a good chunk, when I say a good chunk, 90+% is just a guess off the top of my head of the people that have an appointment of substitute trustee filed against them is a pending foreclosure.
yeah.
So I started marketing to those lists.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because that's a lot of good information because a lot of people have no idea that list even exists. Now, I know you get out also the probate list, the foreclosure list, the substitute list, and what was the other list that y'all put out?
Affidavits of heirship.
Affidavit of Heirship. Now, a lot of people don't understand what that is either. Can you kind of break that down for them real quick?
Let me break it down in two different ways. One from the list viewpoint, and one because what it is. So I'll break down what it is first. And when a person that owns real property passes away without a will, and they need to transfer the assets of the real property from the decedent to the heirs, and they don't have a will in place, an alternative to probate is what's called an affidavit of heirship. A property does not have to go through probate to transfer hands. And a lot of people misunderstand that. They think that once the decedent dies without a will, you have to do the probate, and the probate process is what allows the real property to be transferred. Well, you can do another process called an affidavit of heirship. It's a lot cheaper, and there are specific rules that have to be followed when using an affidavit of heirship. But an affidavit of heirship can be filed from anywhere between free, depending on what title company you're working with, all the way up to maybe $600 or $700 to do an affidavit of heirship, which will transfer the real property to the rightful heirs. Probate, on the other hand, probably a minimum of $1,500 and on up from there. So what an affidavit of heirship is a tool often used by real estate investors to transfer real property to the heirs so that way the property can be purchased. So that's kind of what the affidavit of heirship. It's another tool for transferring property. Now let me talk about the flip side of that. And this is the flip side. There's not a lot of affidavits of heirship filed on a daily basis. There's not hundreds and hundreds of them filed every month. Many of the affidavits of heirship that are filed due to curative title work at a title company. A title company has had a file sent to them where the chain of title has been broken, and affidavits of heirship have to be filed. So a big chunk of the affidavits of heirship that we release are going to be estates transferring ownership so that the property can be sold. So you're already late to the game. You missed it.
Yep.
So a big chunk of the affidavits of heirship are that way. But the reason I still provide them is because there's 50 or 60 a month of affidavits of heirship that are filed. Another 50 or 60 a month, probably 40 to 50 of them are really not really good leads. They're already going through title work to be sold. But let's say there's 5 or 10 a month that are not going through title work to be sold. And the reason they chose to do an affidavit of heirship is because they couldn't afford the probate process. So the probate attorney offered up an affidavit of heirship as an alternative. So now what you're dealing with is a potential seller that could not afford a probate and has elected to use an affidavit of heirship in lieu of probate. And I consider those to still be good leads. If there was 7,000 affidavits of heirship being filed every month, I'd probably never market to them. But with there only being such a small number of them being out there, I still market to them.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have some type of dead loss that you're marketing anyways. It's pretty amazing the service that you're giving people for the price that you're charging. So guys, it's worth it just to join Propelio just to get these lists, right? So you put them out daily. You give every
Yes.
list. I mean, literally, like whether you have comps or not, these lists are very valuable. And I think I watched one of your podcasts with a young guy here, Brandon Richards, who's coming up here in the market, doing real well for himself. And he talks about his first deal. He made like 40, 50 grand right off the Propelio list. So, I mean, and so if you're mailing 60 of them, 50 of them are dead, but 10 of them are good, and you get one of those 10, you just spent like less than $100 to get a really good deal. So what are your issues are getting around like the real estate commission, or have they pushed back on any of this, or like how do you get this information out there? And I know there's another other people doing this.
I think the easiest way to answer your question, and it makes sense to everybody once it's been said this way, is traditionally, if you need comps, your steps are going to be contact your broker. That's either going to be a phone call, an email, a text message, something along those lines. But somewhere or another, you're going to reach out to your broker to get a hold of that information. Propelio.com is a real estate broker's website. So instead of using your phone or an email or something like that, you are now going to your broker's website and contacting your broker through the website. Now, the difference between the website and a phone call is a phone call involves the broker's physical interaction throughout the entire process. A website involves a computer, which allows for a limited amount of automation to be involved. And since a computer is involved, you can leverage the technology to increase speed. So you reach out to your broker via the website and instantaneously get the comps back. So if you've ever had to ask a broker for comps before in the past, you're doing the exact same thing with Propelio.com. You're just using a website, which you're not used to doing. Yep. So the website is the broker's website, and that's how you're able to get to the information.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge advantage for new investors these days, because when I started, there really wasn't a Propelio or anything like this. And so one of the biggest things I see for new investors is having trouble running comps. You can't, I mean, yeah, you can kind of use Zillow or Redfin or Truly or any of those to kind of
please don't say that.
Well, I mean, like if you don't have anything, what are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
So before Propelio, and if they can't get access to MLS, that's why they're having a hard time, right? So now Propelio comes out and basically circumvents the MLS. You don't have to go get access, because it took me like 8 or 9 months before I could get access to MLS once I started my business. And so that's one of the big issues that you've solved for a lot of new investors. Now that's step one. You get the software that allows you to run the comps. Step two is understanding how to run the comps and making sure you don't miss opportunities. And kind of let's touch back on that first deal you talked about, because there's a lot of good learning points on it. For one, understanding that there's multiple uses for a property. And number two, sometimes you have to get your risk-taking nature out of yourself and kind of go for a bigger score and forego a smaller profit. So commonly you see this when people are wholesaling a house versus flipping it. Do I wholesale it for a quick 10 to 15, or do I go for the big score? And kind of what's your take on that? That you think that investors should always be going for the big score, or should they play it safe from time to time? Or
let me answer several things all in that one thing. Before I do that, I do need to just briefly rewind and just stick on a small technicality. You are with Propelio. You are not bypassing the MLS, and you're not bypassing the brokerage, and you're not really getting access to the MLS. And I have to be very technical on how I say some of this because of some of the people that are involved with this. You are still working with a broker as you would typically work with a broker, and you're not really getting access to the MLS. You're just getting access to MLS comps.
Okay.
So I just need to be, for technical reasons, I have to be very specific about how I say that. So moving forward to answer your questions about that property, what I would consider whenever I'm looking at comps is price per square foot for your specific region. My price per square foot for DFW is going to be the same as California or something along those lines. But when you start hitting a specific area in the market where your price per square foot, per se in Dallas, starts hitting close to $200 a foot or up, you should really start considering either adding on to the house or seeing if new builds are being supported in that neighborhood. Because new construction or additions would range probably anywhere from the low side for an addition, $50 a foot to $100 a foot for an addition, depending on what's going in the addition and the style that you're going after. And then new construction is probably on the low side of about 110 a foot right now, on up to about 150, 160 a foot, depending on the style that you're going after. So if I've got a property that sells for $250 a foot, and I know on my side I can build a new house for 120 bucks a foot, then I've got a really good spread there to make some good money.
Yep.
So I always look at whenever I'm analyzing a deal for highest and best use based on kind of price per square foot. I know what I can build for, and I know what I can add on for. And if that makes significant numbers whenever I look at the price per square foot, then it's an easy brainer. Do I rip the roof off the house and go vertical, or do I just bulldoze it down to the ground and go all new?
Yeah, are y'all doing that a lot lately? You know, that basically is talking about, they call it popping the top, right? There's no more room to build an addition because there's no more land, so they have to go vertical on it. Is that something you're seeing a lot in the market right now, or have y'all been doing that?
I personally haven't been doing that. I've done it before, but I'm moving really into much bigger deals. Although popping the top and everything else on that is great, but we're talking about a 6-month rehab, and maybe I'll get a 6-figure payday at the end of that. I'm looking for 7-figure paydays. So like right now, I've got a $30 million contract. I've got a property under contract right now for $30 million. That's got about a $35 million upside. So those are the types of deals I'm going after now, because I'm just really trying to just go and go and go. But yeah, I see a lot of that going on in the market right now because investors are hungry for deals, and they're getting a lot more creative about how they're making those deals happen. So whenever you're struggling to find your cookie cutter 70% deal with a fluff and puff rehab that you can get in and out of, those aren't abundant in the marketplace right now. There are deals in the marketplace. You can stay plenty busy in the marketplace, but people are getting a little more creative with how they're making their deals happen. And that's one of the things that they're doing is they're analyzing price per square foot and then popping the top off the place and going vertical.
So do you think you have more opportunity moving into these higher price point properties because there's a lack of competition, because most people just either can't find the financing or they don't know how to structure the deal? Or are you still seeing a lot of people going after these same deals that you're going for? Because obviously, like on that one that you're talking about where you're going to net over $1 million, if a lot of people could structure that, that guy probably wouldn't be owner financing and going and dumping the property. So it seems like you're having a lot more opportunity because these individuals that get stuck at these high price point properties, if they can't get rid of them on their own, they've got huge carrying costs or huge liabilities on the property, and they're willing to dump it knowing they're going to take a hit. Like he said, he knew that Daniel was going to make a fortune on it. He didn't care. And that's what's called a truly motivated seller. And if you're in this business for a while, you're going to get motivated. Everybody's dumped a property. So is that what you're seeing in these types of properties? That there's no one around that's competing against you, and so you basically have the time to go in and structure it the way you want?
The competition is much smaller, but once again, with a much smaller competition base, the opportunities are often not as common. So, like if we look at the single family arena, and we've got, I don't know, how many homes do we have in DFW? 700,000, 800,000, million, 2 million. I don't directly know the number of stick-built homes we have in DFW. But then you take a look at the number of investors investing into single family homes.
Yep.
Well, I don't know all of these numbers directly, but if we start looking at commercial opportunities, there's not millions of commercial properties in DFW. There's much fewer, but there's also fewer investors. So I'd say that the competition is similar, but a different class of investor and a different type of investor. And that only changes more and more as the price point goes up. You start hitting the 8-figure deals, instead of dealing with, thousands of investors, you're probably not even dealing with the hundreds of investors. You're dealing with, maybe a dozen or two that could actually pull the deal off. And then once that's said and done with, you have to take that further and see where they're at in their investing cycle. Are they in an acquisitions or a dispositions phase? And are they really open to chewing on that nugget? So right now, like the $30 million contract that we have working right now had 5 offers on the table. But it's like a 70% deal, even at those numbers. We're probably closer to almost a 50-cent deal at the current market numbers. I mean, right now we have an appraisal at 52 million. We have it under contract at 30 million, and we're looking at an appreciated value over the next 2 years of around 60 to 65 million. So we're really got really good numbers there. But there's not many people that can take that transaction down, even if they wanted to. I mean, many people could look at that and be like, man, I love those numbers. But when they start talking about pulling together 10 million, 15 million in equity, taking on the risks of holding it for 2 years of a market cycle, a lot of people are saying we're 9 years into a 7-year cycle. Well, that really depends on what part you think that we started turning on this cycle. There's some risks involved, but you've also got some added security whenever you take a look at the numbers.
Well, you know what you should do. You should let me wholesale that and tack a couple million on top of there, and I'll help you out. It's It's the
all
least
day long, man.
the least I can do for you, coming on here. Now it's good and all that, and I think that most investors don't go big enough, including myself, and like you talk about, it's fear, like they don't want to get hurt. But a lot of people should be going bigger quicker. Now, some people have no, I guess, nothing holding them back. They may just hear this podcast and be like, "That's right, these guys are right. I need to go big." Let's kind of give them, some words of warning, because there is some risk when you go bigger, right? And I think a lot of people don't hold back enough cash. And he was talking about, y'all had a $60,000 negative debt service on it that you're coming out of pocket. So if you can't carry these big properties, and like he was just talking about, it could be a 2-year project, you can get in trouble really quickly. And then the cash that you have in the deal, if you have to turn that property over or you get foreclosed on, could wipe you out. So talk about some of the biggest risk and kind of how you analyze the situation and kind of point people in the right direction, that they need to have some type of cash reserve or have someone that they're partnering with that can kind of make sure that they can get out of this okay if they go real big.
Let me think about how to best answer that, because my initial response was capital is an excuse. Because really, you can invest in, there's a lot of people that go back to, you need money to make money. You need money to make money. I've been investing close to 5 years, 100% finance. And let me express that really quickly and break that down as to why. I did 4 properties back to back after I did my first one when I was 23, scored almost a 6-figure payday, almost tripled that inside of a year and a half. And by the time I was 25 or 26, I had about $250,000. And then really quickly, I lost almost all of it. I got into a really bad single family home, and then I got into a 83 unit apartment acquisition, and burning myself back to back on 2 big deals like that, I got gun shy.
Yep.
I'd get into analysis paralysis. I couldn't pull the trigger anymore, and it was jacking my day up. I was doing really good, mostly because I had no understanding of what my fears should be. I was not a sophisticated investor. I was just a really good construction worker that knew how to fix houses. So the flip side of that was I knew nothing about investing. I was just going out buying distressed properties, fixing them up, and then I was selling them for what other people told me I could sell them for. That burned me. That burned me fast. So how did I overcome that fear? How did I get past the analysis paralysis? How did I get past not being able to pull the trigger? 110% what got me past that was structuring 100% owner finance deals or 100% finance deals, because no longer was I investing with my own capital.
Yep.
Now, let me really very clearly state this loud and clear. That did not mean I was being careless in my investments. It was just the thing that I had to make happen to overcome my own fear. I was still going through all of the analysis, and I was ripping it apart, but I was bringing other people in and saying, take a look at this. Does this sound like a good deal? Yeah. Will you fund it? Well, whenever I got other people looking at it saying they're going to fund it, then you know what? Maybe I do have a good deal. And that was getting me over some of my fears. After I started structuring owner finance or 100% finance transactions, not always owners, it'd be a combination or a singular of owners, equity partners, or private debt partners. I was using the 3, but through the 3, a combination of them or any one singularly, I was investing 100% finance from that day forward.
Yep.
And that was because my fear wouldn't allow me to do it. And then it actually got to be a game where every single deal I did, whether I had the capital to be able to do it or not, I started breaking it down and saying, how can I make this a 100% finance transaction? How can I do this? Do I have the capital to gap fund this on a private money transaction? Yes, I do have the capital to gap fund this, but now it's not 100% financed anymore. What can I do to leverage? And then before you knew it, I started getting gap funders, private funders, equity partners, and everything else in between to where I could scale up. So now let's get to where I'm at today with this commercial transaction. Both of these deals are going to be 100% finance transactions. The 60,000 square foot light industrial complex, we have a combination there. We have owner financing from the seller. Remember, I told you I had a $300,000 assignment fee from the wholesaler. I renegotiated that with him, still $300,000, and he's actually going to net more. But I needed to reduce the amount of capital I was bringing to the table. I was getting kind of short on the capital raise, and my closing time got shortened up because of some issues that were going on with some tenants. But instead of giving him a full $300,000 up front, I gave him $150,000 cash up front. And then I got him to finance the remaining 150,000 as a second lien with the deed of trust. So now he's collecting almost $2,000 to $3,000 a month in cash flow off of this deal. So now he's got 5 years worth of income coming off of this deal. So now I've got two partners on that deal on that side. And then I brought in another equity partner to fund the down payments and the negative AM. Once I got them on the table, their net worth's around 20 million. Well, if their net worth's around 20 million, do you think $60,000 of negative amortization is really concerning them?
Yep.
Do you think it should concern me? As long as you put everything on the paper and the paperwork shows, I always run my deal in 3 different ways. What's my anticipated scenario? What is the most likely thing to happen to this? What is my worst case scenario? What happens if the market goes soft? What if my property won't lease up like I anticipated to? What if the holding costs take more? What if it takes longer to stabilize? What if all of these bad things start happening? What if I evict one of these tenants that are mad at me and they decide to burn one of my buildings down? What are some of the worst case scenarios that I might be able to play into this? And what does that look like? And then scenario number 3 that I always do, and that is, what is my best case scenario? Best case scenario, I get in there, I stabilize it real fast, things move smooth, I get it up to market rents real quick. I always analyze it through those 3. And the question I have to ask myself at the end of the day, and this is how I present it to my partners, all of my equity partners, my private lenders, I say, this is what I anticipate to happen. Based on everything that we have going on right now, the data that I have in the market says the anticipated scenario is 99% likely going to happen. But we do have a worst case. Worst case is we go to war with North Korea tomorrow morning. Yeah. The liquidity market goes soft, and now all of a sudden money's running away from the stock markets. We go soft on lending. Nobody wants to borrow anymore, and we start stalling in this marketplace. What happens then? Well, this is what we do. This is my plan for when that happens. And then what happens if the best case scenario hits? We all take a trip to Vegas. That is what that's what I present to my partners. So all in all, what do I recommend to somebody that is thin on capital in their bank account to get into one of these deals? Is learn the value of partnerships. Yeah. Learn the value of sourcing equity partners. Like the $30 million deal, bringing anywhere from the short side of $6 million on up to the high side of $15 million to the table to close this transaction, 100% financed.
Yeah, I think it's really good to hear your story and hear kind of what you went through, because I think it correlates to what a lot of young investors do. They get kind of the invincibility complex. They go out there, they make a bunch of money real quick, then they kind of jump into something that they shouldn't have jumped into, and they get hurt real quick as well. And then they kind of have that fear barrier that's hard to go over. And you've basically pushed through that by eliminating your risk, financing the whole deal. Can you kind of explain what the gap is for people? Because a lot of individuals are probably like, what's he talking about, gap funding? Because that's where the real risk is for an investor, because usually they can't get someone to go in second position and fund that. And so that's usually their own cash. But you're able to do that. And so y'all should be able to do that at home too, and kind of explain the gap for people so they kind of know what you're talking about.
Okay, so gap funding is the difference between what your first position lender is willing to loan and what you need to make the deal happen. So let's say somebody's willing to offer you 70% financing on a $100,000 house, meaning they're going to loan you 70 grand. Okay, but what if you really need 78,000 to make the deal happen? You're short $8,000 to make this deal. Well, the difference between the 70 and the 78 is what you call your gap. And there's an $8,000 gap there, and that needs to be funded. Yep. Traditionally, most people are used to self-funding that. They're funding that $8,000 out of their own back pocket. There's alternative sources, which is what you would call gap funder. A gap funder is somebody that's willing to come in and fund that $8,000. And that fund could be done in many different ways. That could be a second position lien that is willing to come in there and take a risk on that. And they're also willing to, get rewarded for that risk because they're going to ask for more creative terms. Or that could be private equity partner, somebody that's willing to throw up that $8,000. And instead of taking that on debt, they're taking it on equity in the deal. And so instead of saying, you know what, give me 20% on that and 5 points up front, they're saying, give me nothing on that up front. But when you sell, I want 10% of the profit, 20% of the profit, half the profit. You never know what it's going to be. But what you need to do is sit down and analyze as an investor, what is it worth to me to get that $8,000? If I'm supposed to make $40,000 on it and somebody's willing to gap fund that $8,000, but they want half of my profit, I'm paying them $20,000 for $8,000. That doesn't sound like a good deal to me. But depending on your position, and you need to analyze this always from your point of view, What are you willing to do? Are you just now getting started in this business and you don't have any money, and the only way to make that deal happen is to give up half of your profit? I don't know about you, but when I was in my early 20s and I was barely scraping by at $12 an hour, 20 grand was 20 grand. I mean, 20 grand was more than I made in a year. So, I mean, yeah, I would have gap funded that for half the profit. So ask yourself, what are you willing to accept as an investor?
Yeah, I mean, that's where most people went kind of broke, probably back, when the '07 crash happened, right? So they had a bunch of $500,000 houses. So they're flipping, say, 10 houses at a time, but they may be funding 30 to 50 grand out of pocket on each of those houses. So you got a bunch of money in the game. So I think not enough investors understand until a little bit further on in their career the power of their emotional capital. So what he's able to do is he's able to fund the whole thing. He's given up profit, equity splits, but he's sleeping better at night, and he doesn't have, all this, weight of the world hanging down him, all this, if this goes wrong, I'm basically out of business, right? So kind of explain the emotional side of things when you're looking at your decisions, because a lot of people, I think, overlook this until they kind of get into it. And then all of a sudden they're in some of these big deals and they're like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And as you all know, real estate's not a quick exit. It takes some time to get out of these deals.
Emotions with any investment, not just real estate. I mean, like when you're paper trading currencies or paper trading stocks, options, Forex, whatever you're doing over there, the strategies are simple. It's the emotions that get difficult. There's a big difference between trading paper and then trading your own currency, because it completely changes your mental thought process. I struggled with that after I made that really big loss. And the way I was able to overcome that was removing my money from the deal.
Yep.
And I don't want anybody, and I stress it once again, to think that because my money was not in these deals, I was being careless with the capital invested. It took a lot of my own concerns out of the deal, which allowed me to focus strictly on the deal. I'm no longer worried about what's going to happen to my money. I'm worried about, is this a good deal? And I always source an investor that I feel is good for this deal. Like, let's take into consideration, once again, the Weatherford property. Is that a good deal for someone whose net worth is probably around 200 grand? If you're willing to take the risk, it is a great deal. But you just need to understand that with your net worth of a 200 grand, if that deal goes south, you just started over. So if you're willing to make that kind of risk, I've got my hats off to you. When I was 20 something years old, I was making those kinds of risks. That's how I was able to get up so much so fast. But on the other side of that same transaction, I sourced a debt partner that has a net worth of about 20 million.
Yep.
Is this a good deal for him? He gets to passively invest 600,000 or 700,000 and double his money. I get, out of the $1.4 million gain, I get half of that. He gets half of that. I made $700,000. I manage the deal. I manage the processes. I make sure that the deal moves forward like it's supposed to. I make 600,000 or 700,000. He makes 600,000 or 700,000. But we're not even planning on selling this thing. We're using it for cash flow.
Yep.
So if we're cash flowing 18 to 20,000 a month, we're both pulling 10,000 a month in cash flow. That's net operating income. No, that's not even net operating. Excuse me. That is post net operating income. That's after debt service and everything else is backed out. This is true triple net, 20,000 a month or so in cash flow. That is a great deal for somebody that has that kind of net worth. If that deal goes south, the market goes south, something happens on that, it's not putting him out of business. It's not even keeping him up at night. And you talked about, some of those people that were investing in '07 that had $30,000 to $40,000 per deal out of their own pocket. When that stuff went belly up, they were in trouble.
Yeah.
I still do, I right now I'm really transitioning the types of deals that I'm going after and how I'm analyzing what I'm looking at. But what I need to stress is all of the deals that I did in 16 and 15, I did with private money. A lot of the times as debt. I didn't use a whole lot of equity because equity is expensive. Most of the time when you start bringing people in for equity, they want a bigger chunk of the deal. I wasn't really a fan of that because I had enough private equity, private debt to ramp up a lot of these deals. But with them, I had a understanding with them and a discussion with them up front. And I was like, this is my entry strategy. I'm going to purchase it and I'm going to rehab it. And what my exit strategy is going to be is I'm going to retail it.
Yep.
So I make my money up the front and I get it at the back. What happens if things don't go as expected? What happens if this market goes soft? What happens if this happens? And these are conversations I have with my private money. I say, right now you're loaning me $600,000-$700,000 across 4 or 5 properties. What happens if the market goes soft? What's going to happen with you? Do you want to foreclose on me and now take back a bunch of properties that couldn't be sold anyways? If they could have been sold, I would have sold them. Do you really want to do that and then potentially take some loss on the deal? Or would you rather convert into a strategy that might allow us to leverage this and continue making money? So our initial strategy was to go ahead and retail it, take some capital gains, and roll into the next one. What if we restructure this loan, take away some of that 12% interest that you were funding me on the backside? I wasn't debt servicing any of my loans. I had 100% financing. I wouldn't pay any points up front. I wouldn't pay any closing costs up front. I wouldn't pay any debt service throughout the loan. All of that was wrapped into the backside of the loan.
Yep.
So what I would do is with these people is instead of keeping me on at that 12%, how about we drop that down to 7% or so? And then once we do that, how about we source a qualified tenant to put into place? We get that qualified tenant in place. We'll let that tenant pay you some return, trade a little bit of cash flow for the both of us, and we'll let that tenant ride us through this downturn until the market comes back again. And you're not going to really be doing massive amounts of loan in this interim anyways. Let's just use this tenant, restructure this as an exit for a rental, and then once we feel like the market has came back to enough to where at least we can get you out of this and capitalize you back to whole again, let's sell it, capitalize you again, and once we've got you capitalized again, we can take advantage of the down market because everything's in a down position, and let's just start buying up a whole bunch more property. We'll buy up those properties, ride you through the next wave, and as we start rolling back up again, we'll take those rentals, rehab them, sell them off, and we can both make a ton of money.
I mean, that's really, really important what you just talked about, guys, there, because raising money from private individuals is not something that's the same across all individuals that you get the money from. First off, he's talking about debt versus equity financing. We have a video on our YouTube channel, Investor Army, talking about this. The problem with equity financing, I'm sure you tell them, is that if the deal goes good, you give up so much money, you hurt yourself. And then if the deal goes bad, you got your partner raining down on you. Why is it going this way? And then you have the emotional stress. And let's talk quickly here on, so like if you were to raise $1 million from two individuals, yeah, they both fund or put $100 or $1 million into your bank account, but they can be completely different situations. And we're going back to the emotional side of things. You don't want to jump into a deal with someone who's inexperienced, who's going to be basically calling you every day, wanting to know what's going on with the deal. You want to have experienced, successful individuals who understand the business, who have a high net worth, like the one he's working with. So there's a difference between the type of individual that you're borrowing private money from. Sounds like you've done very well at raising private money. Can you kind of give some tips and advice of who to stay away from when it comes to raising private money that's just going to be a big headache from them or for these new investors?
Most definitely. Most definitely. I personally am not a super detailed person. I don't have that spreadsheet and calculated and pennies and all of that stuff all pretty. And I am much more of a high level person. I can look at something and be like, that's what I need to get done. If I have somebody on the other side of the transaction, and it's all about my personal personality, I need to find somebody that blends well with my personality. If I have somebody that's on the other side that's really expecting a very, very correct or not anal person that's very detailed about every little nut and bolt, I am not the person that needs to be investing with because I'm not that person.
Yep.
I am the person, though, that if the deal doesn't start working as I planned, I'm going to be working 100-hour weeks. I'm going to be out there every single day, and I'm going to make sure that that transaction goes as I initially planned it on it because that's the type of person I am. So whenever I'm talking to people up front, I try and feel out their personality. Are they going to be the person that's calling me up 2 times a day being like, what's the status of this property? What's going on with this? I'm not working with you. I've had people come up to me and be like, hey, I've got $600,000 that I'm looking to invest. And then just through the conversation and talking with them, I'm like, I can't work with you. I'd love to take your money. Maybe I can refer you off to some of my friends, but I personally don't think you're qualified to work with me because this isn't going to work out well.
Yep.
So I'll tell somebody that up front. And, as a new investor, that might be really hard for you to understand, but you're essentially marrying this person. It really is. I mean, a business relationship is a full-blown marriage. It really is. And sometimes it's more intimate than your actual marriage because, they're all up in your business sometimes. You got a couple $1 million of somebody's money, and if they are very, very, very just stressed about that, your day's done. Your day is done. So you need to pick and choose who you're willing to partner with. And if that partner works well with you, then it is a lifelong relationship.
Yep. If
that partner doesn't work well with you, you better be prepared for the divorce.
Yeah, and it's tough for new investors because they have such a difficult time raising money that they just want to put any money into play that they get, and they don't they don't realize that, man, like if you get a bad lender, it can be a massive headache for you for a while, especially like if the product. It's crazy how this works, Daniel. Like you can make them 40 grand, 40 grand. You're doing good on like 5 houses. Then one house goes like just a little bit less than what you say, and all of a sudden, well, why is it going this way? This is not what you said. And you're like, I just made you 100 grand in about 6 months, and you're concerned that this one's going to come in at 20 grand instead of 40 grand. So it can be stressful for you. And I guess last thing before I let you go here, I know you got to get back to what you're doing. Can you kind of explain just the difference to people? Because I know some are new on here and some are experienced, but some people may be thinking we're talking about partnerships, like actual joint business owners in an LLC or combined into some type of actual business. We're specifically talking about partnerships per individual property, which is how you want to do it. You don't want to get into a partnership with someone. Kind of give me your opinion on that.
Okay. What I'm referring to when I'm talking about partnering on these deals, it is a per deal basis, and it is multiple different types of partnerships. Like that partner may be my partner via a deed of trust. They have a security instrument in the title that allows them to foreclose on me in the event that things don't go as I say they will. That type of partner is a lender. That is a debt partner. I may bring other types of partners onto the table, which might be equity partners. And an equity partner would be somebody that actually holds title to the property in some form or fashion, whether that be through ownership in an LLC or through actual ownership in title. So we have equity partners. So those are also there. On an overall business level, like as in running and operating a real estate investing company, I recommend against offering anybody a partnership status in your overall company if they are somebody that you could easily hire to do their job. Like the only people that I would ever consider bringing on as a partner inside of my business is somebody that I could not pay to do my job. You know, if they're an employable type of person, they have no rights being in control of the LLC. If they are somebody that brings much more to the table than that, then yeah, that's something you should consider.
Yep.
I don't know if I said that right, but that's what I meant.
No, man, you did absolutely. You did a really good job today. I think you gave a lot of good information, and we pointed out a number of different things, guys. A lot of different lessons in today's interview. Right, go big. The quicker, the better. Right, if you have the ability to do so, but obviously scale quickly, but intelligently. Right, you don't want to take on too big of a risk before you really know what you're doing. But that comes from having the confidence to understand what types of properties you're buying and their valuation. So we also touched on how to run, or basically the power of having good information when it comes to comps. You know, he talked about a deal that he passed up $150,000 on. He wouldn't have torn that house down if he wasn't confident in the numbers that he had, and Propelio can do that for you. He touched on a number of good lists that that they can provide for you at Propelio that most of y'all are not mailing. 100% financing is a great way to kind of take the pressure off and make sure that you don't have as much risk in the deal and do more deals. How many can you do if you have 100% financing? We talked about debt versus equity. So we touched on a lot of different things. I think you gave a really good podcast today. If they want to reach you or they want to get Propelio or they need to contact y'all somehow, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Daniel?
You can always get us on our website. I'd suggest if you have interest in Propelio, check out our demo. We have somebody available doing personal demos for people, 5-6 days a week. So go to Propelio.com. We have a support chat there where you could reach out to one of our live support agents at any time and just, say, hey, I'm interested in what your product is and how I might be able to work with it. Check it out there. If you're wanting to get directly in touch with me, email is your best option. You can get me at daniel@propelio.com. I don't know if you're going to put any editing on this, but it's propelio.com. And that right there, daniel@propelio.com. I am a busy person. Don't let me lie to you about that whatsoever. So if you send me an email and a week later you haven't heard from me, don't go, oh, Daniel's just a big old mean guy and he doesn't care. Daniel gets a couple hundred emails a day. So if it's really important to you and it's a question that you want answered and I don't answer you your first time around, shoot me another email, follow up on it. Yeah. And I'll do my best to make sure I get your questions answered. Please don't reach out to me for questions like, how do you get your private money? How do you get your private money? How do you get your private money? Because, really the best thing I'm going to tell you is up your knowledge, invest more time into this business and start networking. That's exactly how I did mine. And no, I'm not going to tell you who my private money is. So not to be rude about it, but after I do podcasts like this, I'll have 100 people be like, who's your private money lender? Can I get your private money lender? My bad, but no.
Well, how do you up your knowledge, guys? So the last thing I want to go over before we let Daniel go is look at, I mean, well, some of y'all are listening on this audio, but if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see they've built a nice studio out there over here in Arlington, in Texas. So if you're an investor here in DFW that you think you'd be a good guest for Daniel, reach out to him. Also, let's talk about what you're doing there with your new social media push, because it's pretty impressive. Y'all have a YouTube channel. It's just Propelio, right? Just straight Propelio. So guys, go on over there and check out his YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to it, share it around. It's a good channel. He talks a lot about subject to investing and some more in-depth types of creative strategies, which I think is good for a lot of you to learn. They have a podcast, the Propelio podcast, and they're going to be doing a lot over social media coming over the next few years. So go check them out. Follow them on. Are y'all on Instagram or Snapchat or anything like that?
We're on Instagram, Snapchat. I don't know if we're on Snapchat. We're on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. We've got our Propelio.com blog. We're releasing the Propelio Academy, where we're actually doing real estate investing training to real estate investors. So there's a lot of different ways to reach us. We're at, our infancy stage of this whole ordeal, but massive levels of content are being beefed up for you right now as we speak.
Yeah, and guys, if you go watch the videos, clearly, he's not holding anything back. He's actually sharing good information. It's not just another channel where you're going to go find out to mail an absentee owner list, right? There's a billion channels like that out there. Kind of what is so let's talk about the Academy real quick. So you're going to have a training membership site where people can go and basically learn all about different strategies, or what's the main focus behind that?
The primary focus, this is a bit of a subject to talk on. I went through the Rich Dad education. I went through several different mentors and training packages, and some of them were great and some of them were absolutely despisable. And what I say by despisable is seeing those people fly into town in a suit and tie and talk some lady that's in retirement into liquidating all of her assets to buy a $50,000 class.
Yep.
And then watch that woman pretty much go the rest of her life dead broke because you liquidated her bank account. That is not respectable. That is not what I want this industry associated with, and I think it's absolutely despisable. Now, on the flip side of that, there are a lot of mentors out there that are extremely qualified to be mentors that are out there doing deals, and those types of people are irreplaceable. But what I wanted to do with the Propelio Academy is I grew up in a neighborhood that was, not necessarily your high income neighborhood. I grew up in a slightly different lifestyle. I was facing life in prison by the time I was 18. My brother and sister are both dead due to drugs. I mean, heroin, both of them gone. And a lot of the people I grew up with are in that same situation. And there's no way that the kids I grew up with and the people I call family growing up with could ever go to a course and spend $50,000 to get the education they would need to change their life. It's not like all the people I grew up with were bad people, or the people that don't have the money to buy these courses are bad people. They just don't have the resources in front of them to show them an alternative. So what our goal is with the Propelio Academy is to provide those resources to individuals and it not cost $50,000. And I'm not even talking about $1,000. We're going to be doing a lot of trainings. Like we just completed a hard money lending class with Mike Hanna of InvestMark Mortgage. He came in, taught, probably a couple of hours, full blown from beginning to end, what a hard money loan process is. What do you need up front? What's the credit? What's the asset? What's the debt service like? What's the draws like? What should you expect at title? What's your title insurance types of things? So they're teaching all of that. That's going to be free to you. We've got Brittany Washington. I don't know if you know Brittany Washington. She's an escrow agent here local. Really, really intelligent escrow officer. She's coming in and taking you through the escrow process beginning to end. What is it like to submit the contract? What is your abstracted title? What's your Schedule C, Schedule B, Schedule A? What does all of that mean? How does curative title work? What is all of that going to mean? How do you fund escrow? What are your things that you should be concerned about? How do you close that deal out? We're talking about 7 or 8 hours worth of title work, and that's all going to be provided to you for free. We've got hard hitters in this game like Grant Kemp. Grant Kemp's coming in. He's done several hundred subject to transactions and closed millions in subject to RML as an RMLO. That guy is coming in here. He's sketched out over 80 videos to teach you how to do creative owner financing from beginning to end. And he's not holding back on this at all. I mean, he's literally like sitting down with a 10B2 calculator and saying, this is how you operate a 10B2 calculator. Here's different creative ways of structuring this transaction so that way you can do that. His content is going to be broken down into 2 separate types of things. The front side of it's going to be 100% free. I mean, when I say 100% free, we're talking about like 30 or 40 content-packed videos, 100% free. The backside, we haven't completely worked out all the details of how all this is going to work. But let's say he has 80 videos, 40 of them are free, 40 of them are $200 for the entire package.
Yep.
I mean, for $200, most people can come up with $200 to learn how to do subject to investing. Absolutely. And you will actually have actionable stuff where you don't have really a gap. You know, you go read a book and you've got a gap between the book and reality. It is Propelio's goal is to take you from video to deal without a gap anywhere in between.
No, I think that's absolutely incredible, and I love what y'all are doing there. It kind of aligns with what we're doing here, which is, you know, these training companies are going around flying in kind of like locusts. They're coming through and wiping people out. And then, like, if everybody that follows us knows my story, that's what happened to me. I put up 35 grand. I got equivalent to like a $500 home study course, and they basically wouldn't answer my emails or my phone calls and said, "Congratulations, we got your money. Good luck with what you're doing." And so there's a lot going wrong with the business, I think, with what you're doing, with what we're doing. And there's enough of us out there starting to do things like this, which is switch the mindset of the education for new investors. Because it's like you're saying, most people, individuals who have handicap limitations with their finances, if they're still willing to work that 80, 100 hours a week and go through the grind and figure it out, everybody should have the opportunity to become successful if they're willing to work to get it. So I like what y'all are doing there, and we'll support y'all going forward. I appreciate you coming on here, Dan. You gave a lot of good information. I think people need to check out Propelio. It's coming pretty fast and strong around the country from what I understand. And guys, we'll see you on the next episode of the Investor Army Podcast. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, man. Have a good